You hear those really crappy comments like, oh, you're part of the media. Oh, like, fake news. That's what everyone always used to say.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Thanks, Trump.
Yeah, they would say fake news. How's the fake news going, Alison? And it's like, oh man, I wish I could come to your job where you're a accountant and be like, how are the fake numbers? Like
Twitter, I don't think anyone can argue that that's the place where you get news immediately. That's the first thing that
not anymore.
Breaks. Well,
used to be.
You have to filter through all of the other bullshit, but news is breaking on there very quickly.
I gotta be optimistic enough to think that we can stop school shootings without becoming China. And when it comes to firearms, I'm all about more regulations and rules. That's cool with me.
Did you ever feel pressure to where you couldn't say what you felt was the truth?
Warning, may contain journalism, social media, guns regulations, fake news, and or peanuts. Ian Woodstock.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been excited to talk to you for a while.
I know.
It's one of the things that got me started in this show was the current status of the media is utter dog shit. In my opinion, being someone that doesn't really watch the news a lot, I would sit there. I think the last time I sincerely watched the news, it was the Obama-Romney race.
Oh, God.
And
is that
on
2012?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, that was 2012 because McCain was 08. Anyways.
It was because I was living in a man camp in North Dakota.
Yep, that'd be 2012.
Which is where you are from. And I'm sitting there by myself and I'm like, I'm going to go into this as unbiased as possible. Although I was raised conservative, I, as a kid, didn't know what Republican meant, but I said I was. I decided I was going to turn on CNN for an hour and then flip it over to Fox News. That lasted about 2 days and I thought that I was going to go insane and I lost all trust in all journalism ever. So I say that for two parts. One, I'd like to know how far off base I was based off your experience having been in journalism and not only journalism, but local in more than one different state and very different styles of politics in those locations. So where are you from and how long you been doing journalism?
Well, I will answer that. But my other question was, did you follow the Romney Obama election because of Romney was a Mormon?
Oh, totally. I was totally on board. Romney.
You in.
Like at that time, I could say that I was already not Mormon. Like I'd chosen a different lifestyle. I was at the time probably finding my way, if you will. But one thing I loved about Romney was I hope I'm getting all the details right. I believe he was the governor of Massachusetts. And we'll have her look that up, Rachel. But that was the first state that allowed gay marriage. And he, as a Mormon who believes that, gays need to repent, they're savable, but they got to change their ways. No, he allowed that. He didn't veto it. He didn't push against it because he actually listened to his constituents. And I guess detractors from Romney would always say that he would flip-flop. And I'm like, no, he's just, he's listening to different opinions and changing based off of who his constituents are. And that's kind of what public servants should do. Right.
It's almost like an extinct breed of public servant. And it's so bizarre to me that that's only 15 years in our past that you barely have politicians like that anymore. But to go back and answer your question. So I'm originally from North Dakota, Minnesota. You can hear it in my voice with certain words that I will try not to say. So,
please do.
For the Texas audience. I know it's offensive. But no, I'm from there. Grew up there. It's where all my family were Minnesota born. I lived in Fargo, which is, I like to say, because people that's the one town in North Dakota that people know. And so I got into journalism. We were always a very media literate family. We were always a very reading family. I'd say the currency in our family was like wit and words and being able to hold your own with the adults, because we hung out with a lot of adults. But anyways, we got the paper every day, the Fargo Forum, which is sadly no longer in, it used to be a daily newspaper. I think they come out with a Saturday paper, not even a Sunday paper anymore. But I would read the paper every day with my dad because I wanted to be able to keep up with them, and they read the paper every day. And so I knew what was going on. A lot of it was just sports pages. So that's what started my interest. And then I also happened to go to a school that had a school newspaper and a journalism program. And that was it was like half cool kids, half nerds. So it was like a really good place for me to be, which is how I would self-describe, is that definitely wasn't a cool kid, but I could hang, but, loved writing. I was told I was good at writing at a young age. Similar, I noticed some of the things that your daughter ever does with words that I used to do and that I enjoy. So it's like those little seeds, right? People always told me I was good at writing, I was good at reading, all that kind of stuff. So I went into this journalism class. I did it for all 4 years of high school. Loved it. Ended up going to national competitions for it. Opened a lot of doors. It was really cool. And followed that into college. This is what I'm going to do. Figured it out. I'm going to work for newspapers. This was 2006. So they were still daily local newspapers. And went to college for 4 years, University of North Dakota. Fighting Hawks, formerly Fighting Sioux. And then while I was there, I was the editor-in-chief of my student newspaper for 2 years. Loved it, really good at it. When I graduated college, I got offered 2 jobs right out of college, which is bizarre, in 2010 too. So it's like right after the recession. One was working in North Dakota politics, specifically for the North Dakota Democratic Party, which is kind of funny now, but at the time it was like, oh, okay, this could be legitimate. There could be jobs here. And then the other one was for my local newspaper, being a copy editor and doing page design. And I chose politics because at the time I was part of that like Obama wave, if you will, where it was like we all were so hopeful and believed and thought this was really cool. We all kind of got caught up in it. And I wanted to leave North Dakota. So I thought there was more opportunity in leaving the state in politics than in journalism. And so then I worked on campaigns for 4 years, 2010 to 2014, political campaigns. And then after that, I was a waitress for 2 years. And then when I was waitressing, I had these guys I used to work with. When I was in politics, I would call them. They worked for the TV station. I'd be like, hey, will you come to this event or whatever? And they saw me waitressing, and I had just finished like a double or something. And I was sitting down and I was having a beer. And they were like, hey, do you want to come be a producer at KXMB, which is a TV station in Bismarck? And I was like, no. And then
why not?
Because there's always this thing. If you do politics, you can't go back into journalism because you've shown your stripes, if you will. Okay. And specifically and there's many, many veins of politics, but specifically if you work for a political party, you've shown your stripes. And journalism is a non-biased, if you will, in theory. Should be. And I didn't think I could ever go back, so I never tried to go back. And anyways, I go home, I started thinking about it, and then I was like, you know what? You need a job that gives you healthcare and where you're not relying on tips, and so, and I had been doing various odd jobs, but at the time I was just waitressing. And anyways, applied, got the job, and then I spent 6 years working in TV news in North Dakota, Colorado, and Texas. And then left that, and now I work for a municipality for a city government in Central Texas. And so the door revolved again. So they're all very interchangeable. So that's like the short synopsis, as short as I can make it. And that was probably too long.
Well, I love the fact that you have different perspectives from very different types of places. You have North Dakota, which from my experience, it's kind of a barren wasteland. I've lived in Wyoming. Yeah. I've lived in Utah. I've lived in North Dakota. And they all are that type of person that, you're very self-reliant. And, typically they lean to the red side. And, you were kind of mentioning yesterday how for a good stint, North Dakota had Democratic representation. Yeah. How does that happen?
So, and this is, I'll say, so when I I'll start there. I worked for the Democratic Party. They were called the Democratic NPL. And the NPL stands for Nonpartisan League. And so it kind of grew from this idea of prairie populism in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and actually I could have my decades off there, but it grew. I'd say that's pretty close. Grew from there, and the idea was being like, you can do whatever you want in your home. You can do. We're not going to control you. We're not going to tell you what to do. We don't really like, but it was so the idea was it's like, okay, we're Democrats, but like not really nonpartisan league NPL. I'm not explaining it all that great because it's been a while since I was in that world. And what bore out of that too was just some individuals who were in the world of North Dakota politics for a good while, and then they eventually kind of got into office. So it's a small state. People know each other, names matter. And so there are these guys, Kent Conrad, Byron Dorgan, and Earl Pomeroy, who I think in the early 90s, possibly late 80s, leading up until about the Tea Party wave of 2010, they were able to get elected and stay elected. That's the thing, right? Once you get elected, it is you really stay elected unless you're in one of those kind of like swing states, like and you can, that's a similar trait in nearly every state unless you really do something to upset your base or something like that. Yeah.
From what I've kind of came to understand, that's because once you're in, seniority matters. And so you want your representative to stay as long as possible, regardless of. And
so for those three dudes, that's exactly what happened. They stuck around. I believe one of them made it on the finance committee. Another one might have been on appropriations. Anyways, and both of those things just mean money. And up until probably when you visited North Dakota, we were having some pretty serious money issues. And so anything that could come from DC to North Dakota was a big deal and would help out. And who it mostly helped out was farmers, ranchers, and not everyone there is a farmer or rancher, but everyone there loves their farmers and ranchers. So they want them taken care of. And so that's why those people stayed, or one of the main reasons they stayed in office for such a long time. And then, they were they were kind of like Romney, if you will. They'd go both sides. They'd, maybe be like a little bit of a swing vote on a social issue or something like that. But then they would primarily be Democratic on something else. And they would definitely vote with the conscience of their people, of their states. And then politics has just changed so much in the last, it's always evolving and changing. But I feel like particularly, and maybe it's just because of the length of time I've been paying attention, it's really changed. And those individuals aren't really valued anymore. And also these guys were like, they had been in DC for like 20 years. And they weren't even coming back to North Dakota. Like none of them live in North Dakota anymore. They all like, anyways, so they were like, we're good. We're done. We got out of this what we need to do. I'm going to go retire to North Carolina. I'm going to go retire to New York. Like, they're done. Anyways, and now it's so what was funny was our congressional delegation was completely Democratic up until about 2008, 2010. And our state legislature was a complete Republican supermajority. And now the congressional delegation is all Republican, and it is still a huge supermajority. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, we're very divided right now. It's, I mean, every generation can say that, but man, it really feels like we're really divided right now compared to my entire life. I guess the vitriol part of it, it seems like it's not just hey, we have different values. Let's see how we can get along. It's I don't know.
And you brought up when 2012 CNN, MSNBC, I mean, there are, there's various levels of media, but there are also particular media corporations who get good ratings and make money off of that division.
It's entertainment. It's not news. In fact, didn't Fox News win a lawsuit based off of the fact that, this is just entertainment? If our viewers think that this is news, then they're idiots.
I know. Well, you might know more about that than I do. I'm not certain, or I don't know about that lawsuit, but I would not doubt it. I mean, that makes total sense to me.
There's a lot to be questioned in what we're allowed to call news. I've found that. I was talking to 1915 farm owners. They talk about how they health wash and greenwash things. It's the words that we're able to describe things as. And news is not what we should be calling some of these organizations.
Some of them, yeah. No, and that's just like the whole idea of media literacy and like where you consume and what you consume. So like growing up, I read the local newspaper. Now, the only section, in my opinion, of that newspaper that you couldn't believe was true was the opinion section. Because literally, you read the sports section. Somebody's kid won a wrestling meet. That's not a lie.
That's news.
That's news. The local college basketball team is moving from Division II to Division I. That's news. Front page. Home appraisals are going up. Like, that's all stuff that is actually happening. It might be boring, but it is happening. And maybe sometimes you could read an article that is in your local newspaper, and let's say it's about how there were 2 political rallies in town. Not even do politics. Let's say you read a local article about how the city council is debating whether or not to raise water rates in order to build a new school. And then, so you have to pay a little bit more for water, but then that extra 5 cents would go towards building a new school because the one school has 40 kids per classroom and we need more schools. And then you have one quote from one city council member that's saying that, like, this is an investment in our future. This is an investment in our children. And then you have another city council member saying, oh, what's the argument against? See, it's tough for me because I've shown my stripes. Say, when I went to school, we didn't even have blackboards, so they can deal with having a 40-person classroom. Or
our children are already too soft.
Exactly, that sort of thing. So, and there's politics inherent in those quotes, but the article itself and the journalist that wrote it, their goal is to present both sides of the story. Mm-hmm. And so so in that same household where I read the newspaper, in the background was MSNBC all the time. And this was back in the day when Don Imus had his show on MSNBC. I don't know if you guys know Imus in the Morning.
No.
Imus in the Morning was kind of like, it was talk radio back when like you had Rush Limbaugh, you had Don Imus, and you had like Howard Stern. Okay. You couldn't really listen to Howard Stern where we lived because he was a New York based guy and you'd pick that up. But all of them had kind of like their own, they talked about things, and they, like, Don would talk about how kids need to be tougher, but then he'd also be like, well, women should be able to do what they want. And then as he progressed, and he actually ended up becoming a very relatively kind of like Republican conservative pundit. And so then we had that in the background. But
he was originally on MSNBC?
He was always on MSNBC.
Which, like, I think that's, like, very far left, right?
Very.
Like, even more than CNN?
At a certain point, he might have been pulled from them. I'm not sure. But, like, so when I'm growing up, too, like, to set the time frame, this is probably, I'm referencing, like, 1998 to, like, 2004. Mm-hmm. Like, so that was, I don't think MSNBC was what it is now. They were all just kind of figuring out because there was a lot of money in cable news. Mm. So they just needed people to fill it, and that my parents would have that on, and then as I got older, it switched from MSNBC to Fox, and my parents always listened, and my dad always listened to Limbaugh, and Limbaugh didn't used to be the Limbaugh that we know before he passed and all that kind of,
that's all my parents would listen to in the car. Her and, what is it? Loris Lessinger or whatever.
Yeah. So then I had that in the background, and then we would also watch the local TV news every night, which again is property taxes are going up. So and so got a hole in one. Yeah. Right. So I grew up, and then I also went into college and was a communications major, which is kind of humorous in some ways, and then other ways it's like, oh, I actually learned a lot, because you learn as you go through that. Who owns what companies? You got Viacom, you got Disney, you got all those ones, and then the messages that they're pushing down, and like how big their organizations are. And then
that's one topic I definitely want to get someone who is there at the local level. How true is that you have these giant corporations that own multiple multimedia, and then it all trickles down to the local level, and you as a producer want to say X because you feel that is true journalism, but did you ever feel pressure to where you couldn't say what you felt was the truth?
Personally, no.
I brought up to Rachel earlier a video. I asked her if she'd seen it, and I've seen it a bunch of times online over the last few years. I think it kind of started around like the COVID times where you'd see a news anchor
Mm-hmm.
saying a written statement, reading off the teleprompter, and then it shows someone from Colorado saying the same statement, and then it
Mhm.
shows someone from California saying the same statement, and you see
Sure.
you see like 30 different people from
Mhm.
30 different states all saying word for word this statement that, oh, here it is.
I'll say the
Here,
same
turn
thing.
up that.
Fox 66.
The quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about trouble and training.
Have you ever seen this?
No, but I think I know what it is.
Plaguing our country.
Plaguing our
Biased
country.
and false news has become all too common on social media.
Yeah, and so like
Some
these
media
keep
outlets
popping up, and
saying
the conspiracy theorists love it because they're like,
Yeah.
it's the Illuminati controlling us. And
So-
one of my main goals is to because there is every conspiracy theory out there has a vein
Mhm.
of truth. And I want to separate between the threads and not just throw out the baby with the bathwater, but really figure out, okay, what is it? And is it as, evil or
Yeah.
secret as people sometimes may believe?
Sure. So I would say no, but I would say with that particular clip, and I'll expand on that too, but that particular clip that you just showed, I would be curious which news organization owns that company.
Yeah.
So with local TV news, there are tons of stations, right? So you look
Mhm.
at San Antonio, there's 4 or 5. There's a CBS, there's a Fox, there's an ABC, there's an NBC. Same thing with Austin.
And those are all just affiliates, or are they owned by
So-
CBS?
That gets even more complicated than that. So I used to work for a company called Nexstar. So Nexstar is one of the largest media companies in the nation. I believe they own the most amount of local TV stations. And
Okay.
so in the time that I worked for Nexstar, I worked for a CBS affiliate, a Fox affiliate, and a NBC affiliate. So they buy these stations. So Nexstar owns KXAN in Austin. They own KPRC in Houston. They own a ton of small stations in McAllen and Abilene, and I don't think they own any in Dallas or San Antonio, but they own a ton of stations.
Is it mostly Texas?
No. They own stations in Colorado. They own stations in New York. They own KTLA, which is Los Angeles. I think that's
Okay.
the number one. It's either the number one or the number 2 station in the country. And market in the country, not necessarily station. So and markets go from market 1 to market 200 some, 300 some, and the market sizes are based on your audience.
Okay.
And that's a whole other thing. But so there's Nexstar, there's Sinclair, there's Gray, and there is Tegna. Those are the 4 I can think of right now. There might be more. There's also local owned companies. I keep talking about this Fargo Forum company. They were owned by Forum Communications, which is it's crazy to think that still exists, because there used to be all these all over the world. You'd buy a station, you'd buy a satellite, and it could be family owned and run and operated. As that progressed and there wasn't a lot of money being made, these large corporations came in and bought all of them up. So with that particular clip that you showed, I do not know if it is Sinclair or Gray, or if you're able to look that up. But one of those during the pandemic, and slightly even before the pandemic, there were, they call them must runs.
Must runs.
It's called a must run. It was Sinclair. So Sinclair is kind of infamous for their must runs. In the industry, depends on who you are. The Sinclair is kind of the one that you were always told to avoid because of their must runs.
Were they known as being shady?
They were known as being just a little bit more conservative and knowing where their money comes from.
Okay.
So if you think about a TV station,
It's a good way to put it.
yeah, this is one of my favorite things about working in local TV news is just about every market has the 444 guy or the or gal or the Texas
ambulance
Hammer
chaser,
exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to sell ads to make money.
Mhm.
And then if your station is, and then you can show people like the Texas Hammer, you can be like, hey, we're the number one TV station in the San Antonio market. And then they might be more likely to advertise with you. But however, the ambulance chasers, they advertise on all the channels. But I will say with like Sinclair, and I don't know this for certain, but a lot of times you run those things in order to appease your audience and then also your advertisers, because one thing that is happening with local news is that it is dying. It's becoming continually hard to work there. One of the reasons I left was low pay and just being overworked. But that's a whole other subject. We can come back to that. But I'll go back to what you said in terms of having things. The only things that I ever had to must run was when I worked for an NBC station. I had to run Olympic coverage. When I worked for a CBS station, we pushed to March Madness. But we couldn't say March Madness.
Really? You couldn't say March Madness?
We're also not allowed to say Super Bowl.
But CBS has the rights to March Madness, don't they?
Right. Actually, I think CBS, I was okay saying it. I think it was when I worked at the Fox affiliate, I couldn't say March Madness.
Oh, you couldn't say March Madness? The basketball games.
The big tournament. That's what we would call it.
And so, like...
but I never had must runs. I got to choose what I went in my show. And that's why, as journalists, you are very much taught to be unbiased, and you want to show both. You put both sides in. So if you run a story about an anti-gun rally at the Capitol, you also want to reach out to the local NRA group or the what have you and get a quote from them to show the other side. So anyways, that's inherent in what I did. And then I'll let you get to your question. But yeah, I would say me personally, no, never had to. I also never worked for a Sinclair. Our must runs were silly.
So that's pull that screen back up that had them all listed out. Mm-hmm. So you talked about like the top 4 in there. We had Nexstar, Sinclair, all of those. So we have like,
oh, and then there's Fox O&Os, and there's CBS O&Os, and there's NBC O&Os. Oh, O&O is owned and operated.
Oh, owned and operated.
And those are much more rare. I hear one of the best, as you can see, markets. So Nexstar has 116, Gray has 113. And then I believe if you go, I think the Paramount CBS is a CBS O&O. That's only like 18 stations.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. But
there's so much revenue.
There is. And then that is where, however, a lot of those CBS ones are unionized too. So I have a lot of friends that are still in the industry that are trying to get to a CBS owned and operated so that they can get a paid fair living wage.
Own a home at some point in their lives.
Yep. Especially in a CBS owned and operated don't tend to exist outside of like your big markets like Denver, Dallas.
Yeah, because there's 18. I mean, if you count how many major metropolitan areas in the nation, that's probably pretty on point. Looks like Comcast NBC is 31, Disney ABC is only 8, but they're still top 10 of, what is that, revenues? What's ranking them? Yeah. So total ad revenue, That's, so Sinclair's number 4. When you see these, what would you say, must runs that are just blatant, like, hey, here's our message that all these local government or local news stations are putting out. From your knowledge, it's mostly just Sinclair, like Nexstar, Gray, Tegna.
Sinclair's the only one that I know of, because I had friends that worked for them that hated those segments. And it comes from the very top, right? So if you look, Nexstar has 116 markets. That means there's 116 general managers, 116 news directors, even more assistant news directors, but there's one guy at the top or one gal at the top. Unfortunately for all these companies, I'm pretty certain it's a dude.
Are these all publicly owned?
Good question.
It's not like, because
Nexstar
is privately, or Fox doesn't, is Fox privately owned? Murdoch's the guy that's kind of runs it all, right?
I believe he had to step down, but or he might still be, unclear. So with Nexstar, there's one guy that runs it all. And he sets the rules and the standards. So with Sinclair, think of it as probably something similar. There's one person at the very top who is maybe, it's so funny how it can become so who you know so quickly, even despite it being a corporation of hundreds of thousands of employees. And if that one person at the top decides we need to do this, it happens. It filters all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I do think Sinclair, that was something that was definitely going on during 2018, 2016, leading up to 2020, political year, and then pandemic and all that kind of stuff. I haven't heard so much of Sinclair doing that lately, because they got beat up over it.
Yeah, well, they got called out like every other. I'm a big Reddit fan, and Reddit ate that up. So with Sinclair specifically, because we know they do it, did you feel like there was a political leaning, a bias that they were pushing towards during those, or was it more of just a pander to their sponsors?
It might have been. I mean, and a pander to who they wanted the next president to be. But and again, this is all, none of that. I'll say one thing I always hesitate on, having been a former journalist, is like, none of that is fact. You can't prove it.
Yeah.
But if you follow the money and follow the person in charge, it makes sense. Yeah, you can draw those lines, but can you prove it? Not necessarily. And then the other thing that sucks about it is there's so many people like me who are not the person at the top. They're like the 80th person down the totem pole that's working 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. the overnight shift to put out a show and do their job because they're passionate about it, who have nothing to do with that decision. And then you go to the family reunion and, you're like, oh, then you hear those really crappy comments like, oh, you're part of the media. Oh, like, fake news. That's what everyone always used to say.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Thanks, Trump.
Yeah. They would say fake news. How's the fake news going, Alison? And it's like, oh man, I wish I could come to your job where you're a accountant and be like, how are the fake numbers? Like, this is just literally what I do. I have nothing against it. I go in, I do my job. I used to produce TV shows. I put together a show that's an hour long. We try to have a good time. We try to inform people. And then I go home and I do it again the next day. Unfortunately, all of us are part of the, one person does this, Sinclair does this, and then all of a sudden all of you are lying to us. But I'll say on the local level, on the I keep KTAB or the KView, like it's just people trying to tell you what happened that day.
Yeah. But and you already said it about newsprint. It's the boring stuff's the true stuff, right? And so right now we have this race of attention, right? That's what Facebook got really good at. That's what Twitter and all these different apps, it's how much attention can I get? Because if you're not watching or reading, then who cares? You're basically screaming into the void and no one's hearing you. And so it's this dance I'm sure that a lot of these producers have to make a hard decision of. It's like, how much do we do clickbaity BS just to get their attention? And even if they do mean well, what's the point of doing this if no one's even listening? And we have now we have podcasts to compete with. There's most of the news now is all just online on TikTok and Twitter, right? Right.
Yeah. No, it's definitely tough. And I will say, I don't even really hate on. There's things I think you can do for yourself to make sure that what you're reading is correct. Like for me, my trusted sources are honestly my local, Associated Press. I tend to trust NPR. But
you're a Democrat.
I was going to say, I knew you were going to say that. I mean, I know they have, and
you already showed your stripes.
But honestly, NPR tends to give you a pretty good, I mean, I don't know.
But it's also the boring part. Normally, if it's boring, it's true. And guess what? NPR can be. I never really listened to any main media. I'm incredibly uninformed, unfortunately.
I was going to say, where do you get your news?
From talking to people during my podcast. Yeah. No, I'll sit there and I'll go through like, okay, I need to inform myself.
Yeah.
And so I'll go start reading all these articles. But then kind of like the whole Romney, Obama thing where I went Fox and CNN, I find it's a responsibility of mine. I have an obligation to fully, educate myself about the issue. And so I'll read one article about Trump on this platform, and then I'll read another one on this platform. I'm like, okay, those are exactly opposite stories. Neither of them can be trusted until I have some actual data. Like if I have a graph with real numbers, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what's going on. And so I've gotten to the point where I don't pay for many subscriptions, but I do. It's called The New Paper.
Okay.
Just very basic. It's just like one small little sentence or paragraph, and there's maybe like 10 little line items that just give you the basic big hits of the day, like Monday through Friday. So it'll say like, all right, Israel bombed Gaza again. Nothing new here, but they'll report on it. And I've just found that if there's a specific thing that happens that interests me, I have to go onto things like Reddit and just start reading through comments, because love or hate Reddit, they have a culture. Some subreddits have a culture of you either bring some backup, you either provide some sources, or else get the hell out of here. And so you can actually sift through all the comments and you'll start seeing a reoccurring theme. And I bet working with the news organizations, they have some pretty high quality equipment.
Oh, yes and no. Depends on how much money you have. But each of them have engineers, and my favorite thing with the engineers is, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
Yeah.
That's
really
solves most problems. No, but you can, a lot of that equipment you can beat to crap and then put it back together, figure it out. Or a lot of it is just something as little as this cord. Oh, we need a new $5 cord. That's probably more expensive than that. But
well, in my defense, it used to work, and then I decided I got some rifle cases, and all of this setup, I'd fold it up into like a big rifle case. I'd throw it on an airplane. I had these in a trailer for a while where they were just bouncing around the whole time.
Right.
Like it was really fun walking through Manhattan with a big old gun case. I had cowboy boots on and a gun case, and people are looking at me.
It's like one step away from urban cowboy. Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised about how kind everyone in Manhattan was. It was one of those like, hey, like I'm walking here. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
So the strategy of using clickbait headlines has become common. A Roney et al., I don't know what that is, report that 39.26% posts made by unreliable media have clickbait headlines, and even in mainstream media, the ratio is 33%. Holy cow.
I mean, clicks can equal. So and again, it all just traces back to the money, right? So one thing that's been difficult for specifically TV news and print, probably actually more difficult for print, is that people can read everything on this, device that's in their pocket. And you got to figure out a way to pay for that device that's in your pocket. And a lot of the New York Times, the LA Times, a couple, even the Fargo Forum now, it has a paywall. So you have to pay to read that content, which works and doesn't work. And so another way to do it is to keep offering it up for free. So for example, all of your local TV stations, pretty much everything that goes on air goes on the website. And so you don't actually even have to watch. You don't have to have cable. You don't have to have a satellite. You don't have to watch. You can read what you need to read on, and then they'll put the little video in there too, and you can check it all out. Anyways, I say all that to say that the more clicks you get, the more you can get advertising on your website, as you probably would maybe even know in this venture, because advertisers don't necessarily care about your content. They want to know how many people are looking at your content.
Exactly.
And so even if the headline, and then, there's a difference between like a clickbait headline and like ones that are just completely false, and then ones that are like a tease. Like I can see the good in like a headline that is, I think there's one that's like Texas City named most affordable or something like that. Is that clickbait? Kind of. And then because I clicked on it because I was like, ooh, I'm looking for a house. Maybe it's somewhere around here. No, nowhere near here. I can't even remember what it was. And I was like, you got me. But that's going to help them make money. And then to me, that's going to help keep some of my friends employed and maybe give some of my friends a raise. But again, I'm looking at it at a very, very hyper local level. In other ways, the misleading is, I mean, you can't have a headline that's completely incorrect from what is in the story. And then that's the problem. Yeah. People don't read beyond the headline a lot of times. They'll see the headline and be like, oh my gosh, I saw this. Even like recently, my husband was talking to me about the incident up in Apple Valley, Wisconsin, which this video has been making the rounds all week. There's a guy who ended up stabbing multiple young people, and he got sentenced this week. And the video was going around, and the video shows what led up to the stabbing. And the guy was like, they were messing with him and they were pushing him, and like it was like they were going after him and he was defending himself. And then so that's what my husband had seen. And so we're talking about it, and he's like, well, and I was like, he killed one of those kids, right? And he was like, no. Oh, I didn't know that. I just saw the part of the video where he was defending himself. And I was like, yeah, he certainly defended himself. And I was like, and I want to know, I know that video is making the rounds, but I want to know what happened before that video. Was he being belligerently drunk and bothering the kids and then they went after him? Was he being kind of creepy and then they went after him? Did they just go after him? I don't know. I didn't follow the trial. I didn't follow the whole thing. I didn't read a single article on it, but I do know that this crazy video is going around. And the way that our minds are kind of wired is we're much more likely to watch than read. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think you miss some context. And I think that's kind of the same thing with like clickbait. It's kind of, you got to make sure you're checking everything into it and seeing and making sure what you're reading is trustworthy. So if it's a clickbait article from like, what is like a pop culture website, oh, that's not going to help you at all. But if you want to know more about it, Google the topic and then write comma Associated Press. Google the topic and write comma, what's another good one? Reuters. I think Reuters is pretty decent. I've heard
other friends talk about those two specifically, but then you talk to some other people who may have a different political leaning and they're like, no, those are trash because they don't agree with them. Right. And so it's like, but are they telling the truth and you just don't like the truth? Or, and I don't know, I don't have a horse in the race, but I do know that the clickbait, I think it's an indication of where we are right now and what needs to happen to get over all of this, because all the things that we talked about, it comes back to incentive. Like, in order to employ all these people who are just really trying to be journalists, we have to use certain tactics because that's our competition. And if we don't, then we're just leaving the bad guys to spread the words. And so we got to make, a little exception here, a little exception there, maybe avoid a little bit of journalistic, but what that does, it's an honest endeavor, but it's a system that creates us or forces us, incentivizes us to act in a certain way that may not be what we truly feel. And the only true answer that I've ever been able to think of is the viewer, the consumer, us, all the individuals that some people may think we're all freaking morons. But as I've traveled across the world and met people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds and cultures, no, we're all the freaking same. And we need to trust that we ourselves can take the extra step to say, oh, that's clickbaity. I'm not going to support that. I'm going to look for a graph. I'm going to seek out the boring things that are actually factual. And so that's kind of a big reason why I decided the format for what I'm doing here is I want to have people who recognize and value authenticity over, just entertain me for a while. Right. The doom scrollers are not the people who are going to listen to my show. The people who watch a CNN interview, or I think it was a CNN interview with Trump as an example. I think is the perfect example. They sat there for like 2 hours, but the public got to listen to maybe 20 minutes of it all clipped up. And I'm like, I bet you that other hour and a half was the best part of the entire show. I bet that would shine the light on the stuff that a lot of us would have liked to hear. And so I think that us as the consumers, we have to take responsibility ourselves to recognize, okay, where can I find the actual information? And it's not going to be in a nice buttoned up little, entertaining 5-second clip. It's going to be actually digging in and researching it.
And I will say, I will give credit to some, if not a lot of those organizations will put the transcript up or put the full interview online and that kind of thing. So like, that's not good. To like, I mean, and I don't know if in this particular case they did, but sometimes it's just taking that extra step and doing exactly what you said as a consumer, continuing that education. I will say that the line between media and politics is really interesting too, because they're clearly very intertwined, because it's what people care about. It's what they get so hyped up about. I just don't even know. I sometimes doubt the desire or the existence of the undecided. Like, because I kind of feel like everybody knows what's on the table already. Like I can't say I've met anyone that's like, oh man, Trump, Biden, I don't know. They're both great guys.
Well, that's a terrible example.
I know
There's plenty of people say they're both terrible options.
It's a lot of what we're talking about though, too, because it's like, especially when it comes to politics, I think is when you really run into the issue with media, because you are only looking for what you want to find or what you, to some degree, already inherently know.
Well, I hear all the time that media is very, very far leaning left in general. Do you agree with that? The people who go into journalism, do you think they tend to lean left? I would say yes, especially I would honestly say yes, but I do, despite the leaning, there's a difference between how you lean and how you can do your job, in my opinion, because clearly how I lean was already, it's on my resume. Like, I'm finally at the point where I can take that off my resume. I got enough other stuff now. But you working in a political, for the Democrats,
But I also knew how to do my job. Like we all wake up every day and do at least like several things we don't want to do. And most of them involve our jobs. And even so even if I was covering a story where I was very passionate about, such as, I don't know, such as gun control, I knew that I had to get the other side in order to do my job fully. And the other thing I'll say is the line doesn't stop with me. When I would produce, a lot of producing is finding content, filling an hour-long show, and then you have these anchors who read the content. But before the anchors read the content live on air, you have an executive producer that reads the content and checks that you're not being biased.
So the executive producer is the final
and then the anchors read it. And then that's an even interesting wrinkle, because the anchors really have final say because they're live. They can say whatever they want to say.
That's a good point.
Like
unless you're on Burgundy.
Yeah. I once wrote a script, and here's the other thing. A lot of times I write the scripts, but I'm getting the source material from Associated Press and from these other. So when I was a CBS affiliate, there was this thing, it's called CBS News Source, and it would go down to all of the local CBS affiliates, and then you could grab from there. If there was like a flood on the Mississippi in I don't want to mess up where the Mississippi is. There was a flood. There was a flood. I was going to say Arkansas, and then I can't remember if the Mississippi went through Arkansas. I don't think so. And then I was going to say Mississippi, and that sounded stupid. But anyways, so you would get the info. There's a flood. The governor has called a state of emergency. FEMA is on site. 200 people are displaced. So you would get that information about what's going on in a different state from CBS News Source and put it down. And then the anchors would read it. So I remember this one time, I got it was right when the pandemic was getting started, and this had wrote, it was like the CDC recommends blah blah blah, and it and I put it in the script, and the anchor read it, and then he paused and he said something like, "Oh, just another thing we're all going to ignore, right?" I can't control what they say or do.
That's ballsy.
Yeah. And I was like, Thank God it was like 5:15 a.m. and no one was watching. And so I was like, oh, okay, great. That was super fun. But so, and then the anchors will, and sometimes you'll have an anchor that has a very, very inherent bias. I remember back when I was in North Dakota, I had an extremely conservative anchor who would add his own tidbits about political candidates and how he knew them and saw them recently and what they did to hang out. I can't control that. So I put what I believe to be journalistically, unbiased, and then my EP will read it and be like, okay, that's good. But then the anchor, literally they're live. They can say whatever they want to say. I'm Ron Burgundy. Like they can say whatever they want to say. They're the final line,
they're
and
the
they're
star.
Exactly.
They have I mean, I don't think anyone's immune from any sort of power, whether it's celebrity in this case or power or money, whatever it is. So they're going to get their mind a little twisted toward they're actually right in their head. And it's not that they're a bad person. That's typically not the case in my experience. It's they truly, honestly feel that they are helping the world by saying it a certain way. But you could say that for us too. Right.
But then to go back to like what you had asked, whether or not they're all kind of like left leaning, I will say when it comes to just kind of young people in general and like the people that tend to be in journalism, that sort of stuff, I'd say probably like 70-30. It was very rare that you would meet somebody who would be super conservative in journalism. But then again, I'm also hanging out with a lot of people that are very young. They aren't paying property taxes yet. It could change. And then there would be some really good ones. Like there'd be some people I would meet who'd been doing this forever. They're like the hard-nosed investigative reporter. Oh, and you had no idea. You had no idea what side they were leaning, and you couldn't tell. And I would say a lot of the people like myself would look up to that.
That's
and
awesome.
Be like, I need to do better about making, if I'm going to stay in this line of work, I take it seriously and I care. I need to do better about making sure, because we'll all make offhand comments, and I'll say there's been a lot of sad days in newsrooms for me as a journalist. I think going back to, what was his name? The Supreme Court justice who had the sexual assault charges against him.
I should know this guy's name.
The woman was, I always forget. He's been so quiet since he got in. But that was
Do you believe him?
Do I believe that he didn't do that?
Well, I guess, do you believe her?
Yes, I tend to, I believe women. I don't think I can't think of why would a woman put herself through that if it wasn't true.
Well, I think we have evidence of a lot of people going up and testifying falsely for a cause or a payoff, or whether you're threatened, or I'm not suggesting that that's what she's doing. However, we do live in an innocent until proven guilty situation, and it's like,
and then it also, but then this wasn't necessarily a jury of her peers, but and we don't have to get too deep into that, but I'll just say when that happened and when all that, it was Kavanaugh, I had multiple women in my newsroom crying because it triggered memories for them. And so sometimes it's your personal experiences. And when it comes to the social issues, I think that's where a lot, and then it's also like who you talk to. Man, journalists talk to sexual assault survivors, parents of children who have been killed in shootings, school shootings. You talk to some of the people that are having their worst moments, and it can't help but evoke empathy. And sometimes that empathy can then become attached to a political party if it wasn't already before. And so it's tough, what you can be exposed to. And I think that also kind of creates some of those biases as well. I had them before I think I was an Obama baby, but, but also before then my parents are crazy conservative. I'm not crazy. Sorry, mom and dad. But I am not. Like, I am totally different way. And it's my own will. It's my own, what I've read. It's unless certain things change within a particular party, I can't go that way personally. But yeah, I guess you can tell the biases. And a lot of times it's just because you become friends. But I will say some of the older ones, some of the anchors, some of the ones that have been doing it for decades, you can't tell at all. Unfortunately, way that journalism going and the way that people are being paid, you're getting less and less of those people that have been around for decades. And the cycle is becoming much quicker, much faster. It used to be back in the day, you couldn't work in a market like Colorado unless you had 10 years experience under your belt. Now they're hiring people out of college.
Because they can't find anyone else. They can't find
people who will accept that pay. Yeah. But yeah, I'd say a lot of it is left leaning, but those are also just kind of like humans that you meet and you grow attached to. So from my own personal experience, yes. Would somebody else answer that same question the same way? Maybe not. Yeah.
I think Rachel pulled it up, and from a poll, it was around like 60% that admitted, right? And then you have those people who, no, I'm a journalist. I have to keep it unbiased. I can't show my stripes.
Right.
You look at the Twitter files that are very controversial, and Musk would claim that 90+% of all of the employees, they were all donating to the Democrats.
Oh yeah, probably. That's a big no-no. I've never donated to, other than when I worked for a political party, I've never donated to a political party.
And that's the weird kind of gray area we have right now. Twitter, I don't think anyone can argue that that's the place where you get news immediately. That's the first thing that
not anymore.
Breaks. Well,
used to be.
You have to filter through all of the other bullshit, but news is breaking on there very quickly. If you're going to see it first, it's there. Reddit, there's a few other places.
Yeah, I know we'll probably differ on this one, but I feel like, gosh, a year ago, Twitter had it, and the way my algorithm is set up, I didn't have to dig through anything. It was right there. I knew exactly what was going on right away. Twitter used to be great for that, and it's taken a little bit of a turn. I'm getting so much more junk on Twitter. I used to love Twitter.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I'm getting a lot of really like inappropriate stuff, and I'm trying to filter it out. I'm serious about it too. Like, I will be like, stop showing me this, stop showing me this, stop showing me this, and it'll keep popping up in my feed.
Interesting.
It's starting to drive me crazy. It knows
you better than you know yourself.
No, it really doesn't, because it's like,
I'm kidding.
That's what it thinks I want, but I don't. Like, some of it's interesting, and then some of it is too far. It's like the YouTube thing with kids. Like, okay, that's fine, and then all of a sudden you see something a little weird, and the next video is a little weirder. Video, it's maybe my fault for being like, oh, that is kind of interesting. And then the next time I see from the same handle, and I'm like, oh God, I just woke up. Why did I read that? And then it's like, go away. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm serious, go away. And then it comes back, but whatever. Twitter is its own thing, but I miss old Twitter. But yes, I 100% believe that everyone that worked there donated to a political party, but Twitter never pretended to be a journalist.
No, and that's the gray area, right? So they have these protections where, unlike a news agency, you can just say, we didn't post that, we're just the platform, right? Yeah. And that's the protection that they get. And there's this big question of whether they should have that protection. And it's not an easy conversation because it's so convoluted, but it does have a very big impact on how our society is going to move forward as a global society, because we're sharing information to each other. That's how, what makes us human, separates humans from the majority of animals, is our like very, very in-depth, detailed way to communicate and to change this information from one person to the next. And that exploded with the internet. And, people right now, they're saying, well, it's just all trash. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still information that we have at our fingertips, and we need to start teaching each other how to sift through it. We need to incentivize the things that we feel are actually going to benefit us on a global scale. And that way it's going to kind of filter out. I mean, if you take the money away from these clickbaiters because we're not clicking on it anymore, then they kind of start going away. Or we incentivize people that, back in the day, it used to be important to have journalistic, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrity.
Yeah. I mean, it's still important. And I think you still find that in the majority of like your local, there is always that argument of like following where the money is. But honestly, when it trickles down to, like I said, the boring stuff, they are just telling you what they think that you need to know that day. But I will even say, like, in terms of clickbait and journalism, this is an argument that is not new. Like, you go back to the days of yellow journalism, and back when there was no TV, there was no internet. all there was print newspapers. So you would have, and there was not just a daily newspaper. There was a morning, like sometimes a midday, and then there was a nightly. So, and people would pick those up and see what was going on. And then they called it yellow journalism because, and I believe I think it was Chicago, New York, just the big bigger cities. They would print ridiculous headlines just to sell papers because it was this huge competition between like them and the other publishers. And then, and then they would straight up print lies, like too, like, and so it's
because back then, how do you prove it one way or the other? Exactly.
You couldn't. So, it's always going to be an interesting kind of weaving thing, but where I think that journalism becomes incredibly inherently important is in times of emergency or crisis. Like, you know,
COVID.
Well, not necessarily, but I mean, yes, at the beginning, and then as it continued, I mean, and everyone was just doing the best they could. You know, journalists, as far as I was concerned, we were taking our information from what we believed to be the best source of information, which was our local public health units. But our local public health units and our national public health units didn't know what they were dealing with. So what we printed as truth later found out to be incorrect.
Yeah.
Oh, it's airborne. Is it airborne? It's not airborne. We don't know, you know, like that sort of stuff. But I would say this: when tornadoes coming near your house, like, what are you doing? Do you know if do you have the weather alerts on your phone? How important is to you? I'll say that's one of the reasons I don't have cable right now. I do have an antenna. And so that's one of the reasons I watch the local news is like and what's even funny about that too is like, which one is it? Spectrum. If there's a tornado coming to your house, probably don't turn that one on because they just repeat.
Oh, it's over and over and over.
Yeah. So they'll do like, I think it's Spectrum because that's the cable provider, right? Yeah. So that's the one where you have and you turn it on and it's their news channel and it's 24 hours. But if you notice, they rotate because that's really hard to do live news every hour on the hour. That's crazy. So they will repeat it. And, so yeah, if there's tornado sirens going on in your house and if you're not already hiding, you turn that on and that's where I think like that's extremely important. I mean, that's where you need to know kind of what's going on minute to minute. There's still benefits to it.
Well, now we have alerts on our phone.
True. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, if you want to see that tornado chaser, still can get those good visuals from there. But no, it's definitely tough. There's even been arguments too and considerations for the federal government to provide more funding, but to local news to keep it going because there's the three branches of government, right? And the unofficial fourth is media and or journalism. And that is still important because you do still have, I mean, you ever seen the movie Spotlight?
I don't think so.
It's one of my favorite movies. It's about the Boston Globe and the work that they did to uncover the Catholic Church and how they were hiding.
Oh, I have heard of that one.
It's
I have
so
not
good.
seen it, no.
So it's few and far between. I mean, it's not few and far between, but I mean, there's still like a lot of really good work being done and things being uncovered and things being made better by local journalists. The Spotlight was done by journalists at the Boston Globe, not MSNBC, not CNN, not Fox. You know, there are these investigative units that still do a lot of really good, like, for example, in Austin, they did there's the paper tag issue. You heard about that in Texas? So when you get let's say you got a new car, they give you a literal like paper tag to put on your car.
That dealer tag.
How easy is that to falsify? Real easy. So KXAN did a ton of stories on it. Other Texas journalists did a ton of stories on it. It got changed. Like they're fixing it. And because that would be so what would happen was they would have crime organizations or groups that would create paper tags and do things that were a threat to other people and harm other people with fake plates so you couldn't track them down. But then they wouldn't get pulled over because, looks legit to me, you know, but it was so easy to copy. And they did multiple stories on it and now it's changed. Like I see Governor Abbott signs law eliminating them in Texas. So there's still things that can be done. They'd be very small level, but I still think you're not even saying it's not important, but it's still really important. And I support them for that, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility on all levels, obviously at the top. And when I say the top, like whether it's the federal government trying to push down something or whoever owns the company or, whoever the executive producer is, the only way this earth keeps spinning the way we do it without killing each other is all of us just whatever level we're at, taking a responsibility. And I guess because I'm at the very bottom, part of that as a consumer of news, I feel the only thing I can do is truly try to sift out where is it that I'm being fed bullshit. How can I support those who, like you have pointed out, that at the local level, we really don't have this issue of trying to sway in the bias because they actually care about true journalism. And I've said before in the show, I'm not a journalist because I haven't put in the time to actually know what that means. I try to, keep it real as possible and authentic because I think that's the currency of the future. Right now we have deep fakes and we have AI, and it's like, how do we truly know that the data, the information that's being fed to us is actually reality? Good luck, because even this, we could fake this entire thing. We could just be robots right now talking. I'm not, but it's something that I think we all need to help each other with and figure out. I think really the only solution is starting to trust each other a little bit more. I kind of think of the political parties these days as football teams. It's like, we don't really care what's right. We just want our team to win. And it causes a lot of info. Yeah. So what you got pulled up here? If you get information from social media, check the original source. Yeah, that's one thing I do enjoy about Reddit, and actually Twitter, to its credit. They do have the community notes, which I'll say that is the one recent change that I have enjoyed. It's big. It's huge. I like it. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the only way. I like how it'll even be on a really funny video. Yeah. Like it'll be like, have you seen the one where the bull hits the guy in the giant, he's in one of those balls that giant inflatable balls that he's in, and then the bull hits him and he looks like he just skyrockets. And there's a community note that's like, this has been altered. And I'm like, dang it. But it's important because although I don't think kids should be on X for various reasons, because there is a lot less filter. But I see the porn bots are taking over. Yeah, the porn bots. Unfortunately, I'm a guy to where I do slow down regardless of what I'm looking for. The algorithm knows what I want. Sometimes I'll get really excited. No, because for my current job, I have to post to Twitter and I'll be like, oh my gosh, we got 20 likes on this post. And it's a post about how we're going to have market days this weekend. And then I'll look at the 20 hearts and it's all porn bots. And I'm like, dang it. I thought people were excited about market days. Yeah, at least I'm getting likes. You're right. That's true. See, I can't use X. I can't Facebook's it's so rough because it is what it is now. It's hard though because the platform formerly known as Twitter, right? But you visit it, you go. You don't go to x.com. Go to twitter.com. Well, I just click the thing that says X on my phone is probably why. Fair. I mean, the reason I go on there, I do really enjoy SpaceX. I think that they're doing some stuff that has a huge potential positive impact on our world as a whole. And I like to get the updates there, and I still don't really go to it. My buddy will send me a link, and that's pretty much the only time I'll visit X. But I never used Twitter previously. I've had one since, 15 plus years ago, and I think I've made 2 posts and deleted both of them at some point. Yeah, no, I'm definitely a lurker. Are you more of a watcher or a reader? So for example, with my husband, he's always watching, not always, he watches reels. He likes to consume stuff and watch videos. I am much more of I will see the video and then I will read what it's about and then I will move on. I won't watch the video. So I am 100% reader. Okay. I don't have a TikTok. Reels, I'll just kind of get lately I've been watching some videos if I'm by myself and I'm just looking for some I'm tired. I just want to not think about anything. A cat video. I'll just scroll through some Facebook Reels or videos or whatever, and I'll watch nerdy science shit's my
Sure.
favorite. Like some guys, did you know that the you know golden ratio actually is showing up? I'm like, okay,
Right.
that is
Interesting,
fascinating.
yeah.
Okay. And then like etymology, I love like where words come from
Okay.
and the basis, because I think that's a huge reason we have such division, especially along religions.
Right.
And that's really what I like to do when I'm just like, I don't want to use my brain, but most of the time I'm sitting there scrolling through comments on Reddit is really what I'll kind of have my feet up, and like some of them's kind of, I don't even do the entertaining stuff anymore. I used to have like, you know, jokes subreddit. I never looked at that. It's more of like, you know, news and interesting stuff that I get excited reading about very controversial things because I love being able to parse out that both sides are right, and it just depends on what your base value is.
So what are the top like news stories on Reddit right now? Like what do they tend to be?
I mean, I don't go to the news section of Reddit. I usually just go to my own kind of curated one where for me, it's news about the Cybertruck or news about SpaceX. But the things that really, truly you can't avoid, because kind of like Twitter, Reddit will throw in, even though you're not subscribed to a subreddit, they will throw your like, oh, a lot of people are looking at this right now. And it's usually about Gaza.
Yeah. I used to, probably like a decade ago, I used to use Reddit a fair amount and I just kind of fell off. But I've started reading it more lately for like pregnancy stuff. Just just my doctor said this. Anyone else have this said to them before? And it'll be a really nice thread of like a good community and talking about it and that kind of thing. So I see its benefits. It tends to me back, maybe it's gotten better, but back in the day it wasn't I didn't think it was a great place for women. It's gotten better.
Yeah, I think that it's like you get a lot of, and especially in the past, Reddit's way more mainstream now, but you used to have just the people that were constantly always online. They were the type of folks that, you know, the incels, if you will.
Yes.
It's definitely swapped from that and gotten way more user base. It's skyrocketed over the last few years. But the reason I like it is because you can get to the base information way quicker. So if I see a clickbait headline, I'm like, oh, what's true, what's not, what's the base? And I could sit there and I could read that one article. It would take me 5-10 minutes, depending on how long it is. And then I could go to a different news source and read another article and then another article and another article, or go to Reddit where 1,000 people have already commented and it's filtered through. Oh, that makes sense. And then there's a few people that actually know what they're talking about back and forth. And I can read that in 30 seconds and feel a little bit better informed to the point where I can choose, all right, am I going to dig into this more? Or is it just going to be is it just a clickbait and it's really nothing? Like the good example, my younger brother sent me an article saying, don't get the Cybertruck, it rusts, right? So instead of clicking on his article, I just went straight to Reddit, pulled it up, and within a few seconds, I realized, oh, it's not true. And well, it's partially true, but it's the same as every car. When you throw them on a rail car, you have the dust that comes up and it settles on the car, and dealerships, they get the car in, they wipe and clean it all down, take off their little rust dots, not from the car itself, but from the train brakes typically. When with the Cybertruck, since they don't have dealerships, some of them were going out with those little dots on it still.
I was just mail. That's interesting.
So distribution of Reddit users worldwide as of third quarter 2023 by gender. So mostly male, 63%.
Well, and I think a lot of what you're saying, though, in terms of Reddit is exactly kind of what we're talking about as a whole in general, right? It's up to us as the consumer to take that next step and to ask those questions and to remain curious. And unfortunately, and another point that you've touched on, in our current climate and our current atmosphere, we all have friends, we all know people that don't want to ask further questions, that don't want to know more. And
they're incentivized not to.
Yeah. So, you know, it starts from the ground up. I'll say I grew up in a household that was very conservative, but it was also like, it wasn't well, you're just young and stupid. You don't know any better. It was, like education was important. Asking questions was important. Knowledge was important. And I'd say, those education, knowledge, asking questions are similar to the 5 whys of journalism: who, what, where, why, when, how. And so journalists ask those questions and they become, I think, like, I don't think very rarely are you going to run into a local journalist who's going to shout you down and tell you you're wrong. They might be able to use a little bit more source material against whatever it is you are saying. And I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying other people, because somebody's be like, well, my property taxes are going up because the Democrats are in office. And it's like, well, I mean, sure, maybe you're not wrong, but like, did you know that your property taxes are going up to fund a new school for your kids? Mm-hmm. And that was a Democratic initiative. Do you want a new school? No. Okay, well then, good. We're done here. Then you're right. The Democrats are raising your property taxes. Well, yeah, of course I want a new school, but I don't want it to pay for out of my pocket.
I want someone else to pay for it.
And it's like, yeah, I bet that does suck. That does suck. For the second year in a row, I have paid it on taxes, and I am not sure. Well, I do know why. It was because for a while there, my husband was an independent contractor, but I'm like, isn't that insane that you want to become your own person and run your own business and we have to pay more in taxes as a couple? I hate it. I paid him.
Yep.
I don't have a solution.
Well, the solution
I complain about it.
Is really at the ground level, just need to educate ourselves about where the money's going. Yes. But it's such a huge country. It's like, I mean, in ways, I do like the idea of bringing more power back to the states because you have more visibility on what is being spent and why and where, and we get to choose. Like the school analogy, it's like, hey, I do want a new school. Sweet. We can all agree now. But if it's a federal thing, the chances that everyone or even like a large majority agrees on everything is so freaking minuscule that you kind of have to look at it. And like, some people are scared away from that because, like, abortion's a good example. Some people, there's no question in their minds that abortion is the worst possible thing. It's a sin. It's murder. Don't do it. On the other side, you have people who are like, no, this is a quality of life issue. It's why would we bring someone in this world that may have that it's not going to, it's worse for everyone kind of thing.
Well, and you break it down even further, you said you like the idea of decisions being made by the states. It's like, why not have the decisions made by the individual that it most affects? What? Crazy. But yeah, we got a lot of problems. And then I guess all you can do is, I'll say, since I've left journalism, I still pay attention. I still read still read the headlines. I hate saying that, but I do. I mean, and if it intrigues me more and I need to know more, I'll read more. It's just like recently Austin had a crazy week for them, and I ran into a friend of mine that still works for an Austin TV station, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm surprised to see you at our little event that we're having in the city I work for. You guys have had a wild week. How you doing? I'm tired. Yeah, yesterday I covered a shooting, and I talked to the parents, and it was really sad, and today I'm doing this, and it's just, man, they get really whipped back and forth. So slightly off topic, but they go through a lot, like, not all of them, but man, the level of trauma that they are locally exposed to is no joke. And those people are tough. And a lot of times they don't have time to pull the wool over your eyes. They're too busy going from A to Z to even give a crap if you think you're lying to them, because they're not. But again, that's local.
it kind of made me make a comparison between them and cops. It's like we have a lot of shit to say about the cops and how poorly they're doing, and the whole defund the police, but they're front line seeing things and have to deal with it. And there's a system in place that they have to work in a specific manner, or else it just doesn't work, period. And it's like, it's really easy to cast those stones, but I mean, until you've been there, I can't even. I couldn't imagine.
I couldn't do it. I had an old friend who was a first responder at Columbine, She can't talk about it. I didn't ask her to. It just weirdly came up, and we both just looked at each other and we stopped talking, and like I think we ordered another beer. But like, I can't
imagine.
Yeah. So and I have had my first day of work at Denver, I saw a dead. You laugh because you.
What else do you do?
But yeah, my first day at Denver, I saw a dead body like on the helicopter cam, because there was that's one of the things in Denver news is like they're really focused on traffic. Well, I suppose there's the same in Texas too, but in Denver, there's a helicopter that we all share, and the helicopter goes up at like 5:30 in the morning, and you can talk to the chopper operator, and
that's cool.
Yeah, and all the stations share it, and we can all talk to them, and we can ask them to go get overhead shots of stuff, and like if there's crashes, we can be like, oh, will you go to I-25 in here, and there's a crash. And I remember I walked by, and it was a motorcyclist and it was just I was like, oh dang it, first day, like you're gonna see that stuff. But I try to avoid it now. Like I'm just like, no, I'm good. Don't need to see it. So anyways, I only bring that up
on Facebook Marketplace for motorcycles.
Yeah. Well, the guy didn't have one of those awesome like safety thing. He was wearing a t-shirt. You know what I'm talking about? They have those like
they're like airbags.
Yeah.
That I've heard are hit and miss.
Yeah, I don't. But that wasn't the first time. Wasn't the last time. But I bring that up as a very, very, very small iota of probably what first responders see every day. And
how much of stuff that came through as far as catastrophes, like hard things that you had to filter through, was there a percentage that didn't make it to the public because it was just too much, but you had to...
We blur it. Or like, so there's different policies depending on each station. Like, when I was in Colorado, there was like an officer involved shooting every week. Sometimes twice a week.
Colorado?
Oh, all the time. They like, man, you...
Always drug related or...
No, not necessarily. It would be like got a disturbance downtown, and the person was said to have a gun, and we told them to drop their weapon, and then they reached for their waistband, so we opened fire.
Oh, the cop wasn't getting shot. It was
people.
Cop shooting people.
No, there was a couple horrible incidents when I was there, that cops got killed in active shooter incidents. There were 2 when I was there. That was wild. Like, one was at a grocery store, like a King Soopers grocery store, and I think a cop happened to be he was either in the parking lot, he was off duty, or he was on duty, he was at the store. Anyways, he got shot and killed. And then this guy killed 7 other people too. And then there was another crazy incident where this guy was gonna take aim in like an open kind of shopping center, and he shot a cop, and then it ended up being a citizen who was conceal and carry, permitted, everything, and he ended up killing the guy who was going to shoot everybody around them, and then the cops ended up killing the guy who stopped the mass shooting because they didn't know. So awful, right? Like, you can't win. But so anyways,
on that note,
in terms of filtering down, I'll just say real quick, we would get, so a lot of the like in Colorado, they have a policy, and in Austin they have a policy. You have to release body cam footage in a certain amount of days. There's stations that have to wear body cam footage. So what we would do is, if we got the footage, you would stop the video right before death. Like that was the rule. Actually, here we go. Sorry, it took me so long. Don't show death. So we wouldn't show death.
That's the line right there.
Yeah, don't show death. That was the line. Which, you think back in the day, that was not the line. Like, think about the Kennedy assassination and like Jack Ruby, and like even going back, I think they showed Reagan getting shot over and over again back when he was shot. He didn't die, but
people from all over the world make fun of Americans because of what we edit out of everything, whether it's nudity, death, like down in Brazil. Sitting there with the family, young boy, maybe a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I look over and there's just breasts on the TV, and I'm like, are they watching porn while they're getting a Bible reference from a missionary? No, it was just a shampoo commercial.
Oh,
and
great.
It's like 2 in the afternoon. That's just a normal thing. Like, nipples are just on men and women. What's the big deal, right?
No big deal.
And I'm all like flustered, and they're like, are you okay, elder? And I'm like looking at their kids, looking at the TV. I'm like, what's happening here? And it was one of the biggest lessons of my life because I looked at these kids. They were looking at TV. They didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah. So you're like,
just raised around it. It was just like, what? It's just tits. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
And same thing with murder. Like in the news in Brazil, if you sat and watched the news for, an hour, you would see a dead body or 5. Like it's just, and no blurred out. Sometimes they would show the actual shooting right on just, daytime television. And they were just desensitized to it. And I'm not going to say whether America's the right way to do it or not, but if you're, Elon Musk, you would probably agree just to not edit it for good or bad.
Yeah. I mean, you go back. I mean, would there be, and it's interesting, would there be more gun control if we showed what happened at Sandy Hook and if we showed what happened at Uvalde? Because
I've seen in Vietnam.
Saw the video.
At Uvalde?
At Uvalde. Yeah, the stuff that we didn't. Well, yeah, no, and I wouldn't recommend it either. It doesn't make you feel good, and nothing's going to change at this point. So if you'll just get real sad.
Talking about like my studio right now, I consider it like an art form that is, it's a nice balance between functionality and, to me it's art because it's like you got the poker table setup / studio / office in the corner / podcast producer / guest bed / music room. Because when all of them are up, you got this open area that you can lay out like different stuff.
Very
get multiple
European.
People playing. Exactly. I studied for a few months while over there, but it's something that I just love designing stuff. I love having these visions, but it's like, how often do you have these ideas that you actually follow through with? And this is one where I'm like, I've got to see this one through. And it's not the quality. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. It's not the quality that I'd be proud of as like an actual carpenter. I would never do this low of quality for a customer, but it suits its purpose. Yeah. And it costs, $1,000 versus $20,000, which had you paid someone else to do it.
Exactly. No, I think it's great.
That's also a very humble brag on his side because it's pretty well done.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I'm worried that this thing's going to fall over because I forgot that I was building this for the giants that are your husband and all of my friends.
They're all so big.
And we got a buddy of mine, shout out to Brendan. Yeah. He just like leans into it and I like see it like creaking and then like DJ will come on. I'm like, please don't fall down.
Right.
I'd be so embarrassed.
When my parents came down for the wedding, they were like, are all of your friends giants and are all of their children beautiful? And I was like, yeah, yes and yes. It's a strange combo.
Yeah, as over 6 foot and like 180 pounds, I'm the small guy.
Exactly, right? Exactly. In which, that's above average. I'm the average. I think I'm above average height for a male. I think the average height for a male is like 5'9".
Yeah. How tall are you?
I'm 5'10" on a good 5'10"? Day. I'm probably 5'9" today.
Do you play volleyball?
Mm-mm.
No. You missed your calling.
Should've. No, absolutely should have. The girls so I was a lot like how you're raising Ever and Stella. Like my parents we didn't do weekend sports. There wasn't like our weekends were not dominated by what the kids wanted or what the kids were doing or kids activities. We did whatever the parents wanted to do. So I didn't start playing sports until middle school. And by that time, there was already very well established like girls that had been doing traveling volleyball forever and traveling basketball and traveling softball. And those girls also ended up being the popular girls. And I did fine, but I felt uncomfortable and unwelcome. And so I was like, I'm going to go be a runner. So
that's how I felt with baseball. Yeah. Like my parents got me a baseball glove, 9th grade. And I said, thanks, guys. What am I supposed to do with this? Or like, oh, you always talk about trying out for the baseball team. And I said, that should have happened like 4 years ago. That ship sailed. Yeah. Baseball specifically, because it's so political. The only way you get better is play, and you only play if
they like you. Yeah, exactly.
You're already on the team.
Yeah. And so I played 9th grade basketball, and I started, and that made a lot of other girls real mad. And I didn't necessarily start because I was great, but I was 5'10" and I hustled and I played good defense. I never wanted I didn't play offense. I got the ball and I was like, you can have that back. I was like, I don't want that. go over there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I scored for the wrong team in basketball in junior high.
But track and field, you don't have to worry about anyone but yourself.
Yeah. I was the guy that did the hurdles, the 40-yard dash, and high jump, and shot put, and discus.
40-yard dash? How old are you?
Not 40-yard dash. That's 400. 400 meter. 400 meter.
Just kidding. The 40-yard.
I
retired in the 1938 Olympics. No, I'm just kidding. I made that up. That was not true.
My friends called me a liar because I told them I ran a 4.440 in like sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
And that's how I remember it. I got to go back and see if there's any records of that.
It's a tough one.
I'm probably full of shit. Probably.
That would be a good 4.40 is quite good.
So getting back into a topic that I find so, I have friends that have probably tens of thousands of dollars worth of guns and ammunition. And then I have friends that they refuse to touch a gun. And I've had conversations with people in Spain, in Germany, Australians, and then within the United States, you've got the Californians versus Colorado versus Texas versus Wyoming. And it, like, other than abortion, and maybe even as much as abortion, gun rights is such a huge hot topic. And it's all around, you know, the Constitution. As someone who has shown her stripes, but also grew up in a more or a less populated area, which I think is a big reason how people see it.
People needed guns to shoot coyotes to get away from their cattle. Yeah.
Where there was an actual utility versus, you know, in New York, if you had a gun, you were going to kill someone.
Probably.
In Wyoming and Colorado and Utah, where I was raised, it was just a part of, my grandpa's taught me to shoot guns. That was how they did. They actually hunted. So do you have a firm stance on how you think that our country should be working with gun control?
I would say I have ideas, but in terms of a firm stance, I would say not necessarily, but that's simply because I don't think I have enough education on it. But my ideas or my thoughts would be, I think Second Amendment rents are fine, but I think that they should be limited. I don't think I see more of guns as a utilitarian use, and I also see them as a protection use. I don't have any problem with someone having a firearm in their house in case they're worried about someone coming in and protecting themselves, but I don't think people need assault rifles. I think you can do just as well to protect yourself with a basic firearm than with one that shoots 50 bullets. And again, I don't know anything about guns.
But I think the argument could be made, just trying to draw a parallel that I can get close to, because we're talking about a very powerful, dangerous, deadly object, and that is also a car.
Yeah.
And you could argue that no one should own a Lamborghini because it's unnecessary. But why do people get them? It's because it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's something that you can use responsibly, but you could also murder a lot of people with.
Well, yeah, I guess if you ran a Lamborghini into an elementary school, you know, you could at least kill
or a bus
21
or a
kids.
Cement truck that hit a school bus recently.
Sucked. Yeah, that was too bad.
The thing I always go back to, and I've said this about drugs a lot, which is normally the topic I force upon my guests, but I think we can treat all very powerful and potentially dangerous, but still also useful items the same. And we kind of already have a platform for that.
So I'd say there's a slight difference between that analogy. One is a constitutional protected right, and one is not. There's
Lamborghinis are not protected by the Constitution.
So therefore, Lamborghinis can have more restrictions put on them. You can have more conversations about what needs to be done to make them safe. You can force people to have insurance so that if you hit a bus full of kids and you kill them all, insurance is going to pay for, someone's going to get sued, and there's lawsuits also involved in gun control. But I guess I think that's to me the difference. And I think that if you want to compare the two, then you should be able to have the same conversation and regulations on them both. And you can't currently have the same conversations and regulations on one of the two.
Why not?
Or just our political climate, our world, constitutionalists, Second Amendment, Bible thumpers, I need this to protect my family. I would love to be able to have that conversation. I think that conversation has been attempted to be had a multitude of times. I'm probably going back before Columbine, which was 1999. We're almost 30-year anniversary of that. I think those conversations people are just unwilling to have those conversations because it doesn't win elections.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the whole,
It's far more
it's a
controversial.
teammate thing, or a team. We're rooting for one side or the other, and so regardless, we're on that one side. And the extremism is the part that both parties are guilty of, because on one side you've got the Beto O'Rourke's are saying we're going to take your assault rifles away, then the other side says take it out of my dead hands, and we have a non-starter conversation right there.
I'm fine with taking them away. I don't know why you need them, because they're fun.
Well, you have
for the apocalypse.
You have a culture that it's always been there. Grandpa's handed them down.
Well, assault rifles have not always been there. Guns,
well,
yes.
An assault rifle and a regular rifle are no different, other than how they look.
Are they?
I mean, if you want to go to just bolt action rifle, single load on every single
and that's where I don't have the knowledge, but I think about the fact that the rifle that Grandpa had in 1942 is not the same as the rifle that made children unrecognizable.
So the origin of the AR-15, the first developed in the 1950s for civilian use, the AR-15 rifle was named after its manufacturer, Armalite. Oh, I did not know that. The letters AR do not stand for assault rifle or automatic rifle. So I guess the difference between an assault rifle and a hunting rifle is it's more common to have a larger clip, right? So you could potentially get 30 rounds in and go bam, 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 which in a mass shooting era that can be important, right? However, you can get a non-assault rifle and throw in a larger clip as well, depending on the gun as well. You can even do it with pistols.
You can modify them. You can build them yourself. There's ghost guns. There's all sorts of things. If you have the intent to go out and commit a mass shooting, you can do it regardless of whether or not you can't have this thing. But I do think that we have to try harder to do something. And after so many incidents, there's been nothing done other than a beating of the drum about mental health. And yes, of course, we got to do something about mental health, but why not do just another thing too? So I just wish that it was a conversation that would actually go somewhere, and it's just not, and it's going to happen again.
Well, I think it could, and I think it comes
Maybe
down
someday.
to you have to start somewhere that you're not scaring either side, right? And so let me suggest a potential way forward. And from your stripes, do you think that people from the left people who don't have experience with guns and aren't feeling like it's being taken from them? Because I'll tell you right now, there are people who will never, ever, ever bow down they'll never actually give them away, right? And so that's, I believe, just a fact of the matter. It could potentially, Australia did it. It was a very different situation, but we have dynamite that can be used legally. It's not in the hands of every citizen. It's not part of the Constitution. We can't use it for hunting, but they have a thing in place. And it's the same thing we have in place for cars. In order to use a vehicle in the United States, you have to have some education. Then you have to get it registered and insured. And why would we not treat guns the exact same way? Because the ban is where you lose the right, the taking away. Because when you start talking about the difference between an assault rifle and not, and this and that, it shows that on the people that are very pro-gun, they're like, that makes no sense, because it kind of doesn't, right? The logistics of what is being suggested just could never really truly happen, right? It would be taking guns away from good citizens, but is going to do nothing against the people that shouldn't have them in the first place. But I think most people on the right would agree that if you are a gun owner, you should be educated on it. And so we have a more formal education that goes into it. And I think most people I know, they don't want these killings to happen either. And although there's some people that are there on the very far right, they don't trust the government because they're conspiracy theorists. I wouldn't mind, because most of mine are all registered. I've received some from my grandpa that I don't know if they are. I think I'm legal right now. I don't
Probably
think
good.
at the moment it's required for me to register, and we definitely don't have insurance on it. But if you had a small insurance, say like, $50 a year on every single firearm you owned, some people would have to get rid of a lot of firearms because they couldn't afford them. But
yeah. That would be fine with me. And when it comes to firearms, I'm all about more regulations and rules. That's cool with me. That would be fine. I would have, a lot would really need to change in order for that to happen. Because like right now we can't even get background checks. Like barely.
Where do we not get back? I guess at like flea markets and stuff.
And there's
like private sellers.
Yeah, and then
that's changing now,
gun
though,
shows,
right?
it might be changing. I'm not as completely up to date on it, and it could be a state by state rule too. It's on similar veins on things that are contentious. It's right up there with abortion. It could go down to like that kind of thing. Anything that can be done for more regulations and less like needless deaths. And I think when I talk about the needless ones, it's really the ones that with the school shootings, the mass shootings, And
that's interesting. So Rachel just pulled up talking about insurance on guns, says those in the survey recognize the parallels, stating support for liability insurance on guns. So that's 75% of the people agreed. And that's the same league as support for liability insurance on homes, which is the 72. There's more people that believe in insurance for guns than insurance on homes, and on cars, 84%. Well, we see the need for it in cars. Obviously, the 84% of people are like, I've been hit before. I'm glad I had insurance. With guns, what that's going to do, it's going to limit the amount of people who are not responsible having the guns, because all of a sudden, if there is a chance that you are caught with the gun that isn't registered and you don't have insurance, not only are you going to lose it, and I, as a gun owner and an avid person, like I truly do not feel like we should be banning anything, whether it's books, guns, whatever, but we should use them responsibly.
Yeah.
And part of that is having an insurance policy to where, so we had the first mom and dad sentenced to prison because their son shot up some kids. I don't know the backstory. I need to look into it. But if we had, even if it's just, I don't even think it needs to be that much. The millions, I think there's more guns than people in the US. So there's 300 million Americans. So let's say there's 300 million guns and we collect $50 a year. That's less than $5 a month to own a gun. I would happily pay that on all of my guns. It would be, I'd have to like really care about keeping them, but they just sit there in a safe unused unless I go and just, brush off the rust and shoot them just for practice. But it'd be nice to have in case we did have a catastrophic grid failure and I needed to go grab some deer. Like it's nice to have. And then when the zombie apocalypse happens, all of a sudden there's going to be a lot of gun purchases. But
actually just a lot of gun stealing.
So how much liability coverage should a gun owner carry? Between 50,000 and 250,000, said 77% of those surveyed, with 7% calling for 1 million or more. Wow. The majority of those in favor of the coverage think separate policies should be required for each weapon. In comparison, 31% say a single policy per owner would be enough. I could see both working, right? And so what I'm hoping for, because I Am Woodstock will change the world, is, we have to have something that I think both the gun nuts and the anti-gun nuts, and I call them nuts because I think it's unrealistic to think that we're going to live in a world without guns. And, we do have a lot of countries that the government takes over and the people cannot rise up. I'm not saying we should ever get to that point, but we see it currently happening in the modern world. And I hope that it never happens in America. I don't think it will, but I think that's there for a reason. And I think that we can do it responsibly and have it to where both parties can be happy. And whether we completely avoid school shootings, I don't know if there is a possibility unless we do have a, authoritarian government like China where we truly do not have our freedoms. I don't think most people on the left would want to go to that either.
No, but I do think that in order to, I gotta be optimistic enough to think that we can stop school shootings without becoming China. Because there's gotta be, we can still solve problems. We can still make lives better. We can still do something good. I would have difficulty living in a world where it just became a truth. And unfortunately, that is what is occurring. And then every once in a while, there's one that really hits home with everybody. And I think that was Sandy Hook and Uvalde. And maybe if there's another one, and I hope that there's not another one, and it's particularly targeting kids under 8. That's where I gotta believe that that we can do something to stop that without having without becoming China. Because I can't be I'm not gonna call you pessimist, but it's too pessimistic for me. I gotta have a little bit of hope.
Yeah, not pessimistic, but I think just the reality of how many guns are in the U.S. I don't see a future in my life to where citizens don't own guns. And so if that's the truth, and maybe I'm wrong, but if that's true, what steps do we need to do that we can all agree on a middle ground? At least we're doing something, because as of right now,
we argue, we get mad. We argue, we get mad. Legislation gets proposed. It gets passed down. It fails. People use that legislation to then get reelected against opponents, call them anti-gun, and then we just continue the cycle. And then we get tired, and then we move on about our day. And nothing changes. And then you have the parents of the victims who are victims themselves, whose lives will never be the same. And then they themselves are attempting to enact change, and just all the doors that opened initially, more of them start closing. And then you get one tiny little baby bit of change, and you just cling on to that. And that's, gosh, I wish I could remember this one. It was change is slow. Politics is slow. It seems like things are happening all the time, but in order to have something really good happen, it can take years. But
I think most hard truths that I've found in my life, it's all about the things I've learned as I've become wiser, is that the counterintuitive concepts, the ones that are kind of backwards from what you're trying to strive for an outcome. And so you start focusing on that outcome instead of what the root problem is. And it doesn't really, it's like, I've argued with drugs before. It's like, we want to avoid all the violence that comes with the illegal drug trade. Well, banning drugs is causing that issue, right? And I think anytime you're going to ban anything, you better really have a large majority of people that agree on it. And I really think that there's a place in this world for most things that are powerful, most things that are deadly potentially. And the only way to approach it is remove the word ban from any argument, because that's going to stop the conversation. There's zero conversation if you bring a ban. Yeah, that's rebrand. Yeah. That's insure. That's insure our guns. Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's ensure our rights for gun use. Back
in the day, before it was pro-life and pro-choice, it was anti-choice and pro-choice.
Oh, really?
Right. So, but the anti-choicers rebranded because pro-life. That was confusing. And then they got pro-life, and they're and that people were like, "Oh, okay, yeah." Yep.
Well, it comes down,
because it sounded negative.
Yeah,
so we just come up with another word.
All of these things where we're super divided. In my travels across the U.S., I was speaking to people out in the middle of nowhere. I was speaking to people who lived in high density locations, and it came down to your values. And another one is religion versus non-religion, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a religious person and you live in the country, you're definitely going to be a Republican. If you live in a dense community and you don't believe in God, you're definitely going to be a Democrat. And then there's the in-between that live in dense communities but believe in God. And there's people who live out in the country that don't believe in God. And you get those are the swing voters, as I see them. It's almost, there's exceptions, but it's almost without a doubt that's kind of how our country is separated. So
yeah, I'd say probably currently, I'd say 20, 30 years ago, it might have been a little closer because those farmers out in the country who believed in God were getting some good money from the federal government to keep their farms going, to keep their ranches going, and they knew where that money was coming from. And it just changes. It's all, unfortunately, a lot of it's about the money.
Yeah, and it's about the narrative that once you get enough control over media, you can really kind of push that narrative in whichever way you want.
Well, and again, it still very much depends on what if that's the end game or the end goal, too, because it's like with the local with the TV stations, the dude at the top, if you look at who he politically donates to, and I don't know, you can get a feel for where he leans. And he's definitely, and if he's not making a donation to a particular political candidate, you can look at who else he's making donations to. You got PACs, you got other stuff, you got organizations that filter some of their money. Like if you donate money to Planned Parenthood, now grant that's probably a bad example because I think Planned Parenthood's taking all that money because they need it. But if you donate to an organization that's like a women's organization, they might filter some of that money to Planned Parenthood, or they might filter some of that money to a candidate that supports Planned Parenthood, and that so it kind of like trickles around that all that stuff. And I guess I just bring that all up to say that a lot of the guys at the top of these media companies, except for possibly the one that you showed earlier, and I don't know the current story, they're making enough money off of the local news and the 444 guys and the Texas Hammer that they don't have to push the political down on it, and then they can just pocket their big giant salaries and donate to whoever they want to and make things happen on their own accord without having to pressure the Market 198 TV station to run a story about the border. But if you look at different ones, like if you look at the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox News, that's a different story. But again, I can only speak to the local ones. They're too underpaid and too busy and too tired to inject bias.
That's good to know. Unless you work for one of them that they push down the must-runs.
Right. And then there's nothing you can do about that either. Like, it's just a job. Like I said, you do stuff every day at your job you don't want to do.
And even those, as you pointed out, there is backlash because it's blatantly unauthentic and obvious that that's
right.
My hope is that as we continue to grow in technology, our ability to not only receive but also filter the knowledge is going to allow the baseline human being that it doesn't come from a pedigree can be educated enough to where then they can start really incentivizing those who do well instead of the ultra wealthy that are murdering people, and they're also the good guys because they write the news articles. I think we're seeing less and less of that with social media. As much crap is introduced through social media, we also have a lot of transparency that you just can't hide stuff nearly as easy anymore.
Right. Yeah. And you can also control your do what you can to control your algorithm too. If you see something, you're like, oh, that seems weird. That doesn't seem right. Look where it came from, check your sources, that sort of thing. Follow all of your local news organizations, have Facebooks, have Twitters, like follow them. They'll pop up on your feed more. You can filter out the bad stuff. Like I remember, probably like 6, 7, 8 years ago, my Instagram was just littered with like insanely attractive, physically fit women doing like workouts. And
sounds like my feed.
Yeah, right. And at first I know why they popped in, because I was looking for workout videos, and then I noticed that they're making me feel a certain sort of way, like making me feel that I wasn't doing enough, making me feel that I wasn't trying hard enough, making me feel that I could, look this way if I did XYZ. And it's sure I could if I was a fitness professional, but like I have a job, I have, old man dog that I walk like 3 times a day. Anyways, so I made sure to stop clicking on those things, and I started pretty much only clicking on cat videos and dog videos of them doing cute or funny things. And I changed my insights page completely to just be like cute dogs, cute cats, funny cartoons, things that made me happy, things that brought me joy. So now they are feeding you stuff because they think that that's what you want to see, like what we started talking about with Twitter, because I'm getting some weird stuff on my Twitter feed. But there is something that I clearly did at some point to make them think that I wanted that. Just do it at your best to like try to keep, like, recognize and have an internal monologue about what you're consuming. And
the only thing I would add to that is do the whole Romney Obama thing every once in a while so you can understand your own biases. Like, I keep finding myself getting into it's impossible not to, but we're surrounded by echo chambers.
There's cable these days.
Gonna find one because it's enjoyable. It's like everyone on the left, when it turned to X, they're like, oh, it just doesn't feel as it was home before. And I'm like, well, it's because it was very leaning left, and then so it is uncomfortable seeing stuff that is uncomfortable. I mean, I guess that's the definition.
Well, I thought it was home because the people on there it was the funniest app. It was the wittiest. It was the funniest. Like, people were burning each other left and right, or like having really funny hot takes and all that kind of stuff. And then all the funny people left.
Well, it's unfortunate how Elon Musk went about it, because he kind of simultaneously made some pretty, like, it made him look very, as a good buddy of mine, Matt, says he's a Republican cuck now, is how he views him. But no, he whether it's true or not, he had that perception. And so you had all of these advertisers and then a lot of users that all, to prove a point, said, hey, we're bailing out. And so, blame Elon for how he did it. But it happened that a lot of people left, a lot of advertisers left. And then you had the influx of all the people that had been booted out, whether you agree with whether they were booted out or not, they came back in. So there was a huge wave of some people that you didn't agree with that just came and smashed into your just the total content that was in there. And so I think it's starting to settle down now to where hopefully, I mean, if you believe Musk for even a second on what his overall vision for doing what he did was, it's hopefully going to get to the point where you can have a conversation between all sides again. And I think the community notes is going to be a big part of that, because if you're an idiot on the right, you're going to get called out. And if you're an idiot on the left, you're going to get called out. And I don't think we should be deleting or banning anything. We leave that up for posterity. Let people see that 5 years ago, you were completely off base about XYZ. And why are we banning those people? Let them sleep in the beds they make.
Yeah. I don't know too much about that. I haven't looked into it all that much. I just know from my own experience that used to be a lot funnier.
Yeah. Well, I don't use it, so.
But it used to be a lot funnier. No, it's not as funny. But and I would actually be really interested. I'm interested in following the future of it as like a, you think about kind of what we came up with. It was like MySpace, Twitter, Facebook, big three. MySpace fell by the wayside. Like Tumblr fell by the wayside. But I don't think those two ever got to the status that like Insta, Facebook, or Twitter have. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen to Twitter in the next 5 years. I'll just be curious. Because like I didn't go to Threads. I know a lot of journalists are really trying with Threads. But I still didn't go over there.
Facebook's trying to throw it down my throat. Yeah.
So is Insta. But I will say one thing with Twitter from my current and past job standpoint, that it is a hugely reliable for, and this would be my fear of it going away, is a lot of first responding agencies will use it as the first place they go to for developing situations. So like if you go to Twitter and you type in like the Austin Police Department, that's essentially where journalists in Austin find out about ongoing situations, shootings, stabbings, death investigations. So what will happen is just like in the middle of the day, on any day, Austin police might tweet, body found at corner of West Palmer Lane and blah, blah, blah. First responders on scene, media briefing to follow. And so then reporters will see that, and then they will go. So then you can put it in your show, let people know why there is a heavy police presence in this area, what's going on, because people immediately worry about themselves. Oh my gosh, there's 20 cop cars there. Is everything okay? Am I okay? Is my family okay? Is my dog okay? And so then local news can say, a body was found here. They're doing a death investigation. That's all we know at this point. There'll be a media briefing in 2 hours. And so that was the same in Denver, and that was the same in Austin, and a lot of other first responding agencies use that as their first source of information to get that out there. And I think that is a fantastic source for Twitter. It's almost kind of like with local news in terms of like your severe weather coverage. Like these are the things that I think are important to public safety.
Fast moving.
Right. And it's important to public safety and like feeling okay. So I hope that doesn't go away, but be interesting to see what happens in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the first responding agencies aren't going to threats because they've established this here and they've been doing it for years and it's working. Because in that way, the cops who are already super busy aren't getting calls from journalists being like, what's going on here? They can be like, look at our Twitter.
That's a good point.
We got it up. Because they're taking calls from citizens that are like, what's going on here? So they're busy. Yeah. Couldn't imagine being a telecommunicator. Oh God.
Well, Alison, we've had a nice long conversation. We've hit on a bunch of stuff. I always try to sway away from politics, yet I always talk about it. No,
you started with it.
I did. Well, that's part of, what made you, you worked in it for a while. It's interesting to see the inside take because there's certain things that, whether it's, one platform or the other, there's a perception in the public. And I really like to see where we're right and where we're wrong. And it's usually a little bit of everything, devil lies to us using truths kind of thing.
Right. And I think it goes right to your point, and your mission statement for this podcast is we're all just individuals trying to do the best we can. And when you break it down into like each and every job and singular decision, me as a journalist and a former, political employee, I'm just trying to do the best I can and follow the rules and do my job. Not everybody is me, but I think once you get deeper into people, like you said, you can find that is inherently, unless they're like some sort of superhuman evil, that's inherently what they're just trying to do. Just get by.
Well, you said it earlier, and you have to go down to the individual. If we're talking about abortion, talking about gun rights, we're talking about whatever it is, the right answer is never going to be found at a government level. It's what is that person? What is their background? Why are they talking about, is an abortion right for them? And I think regardless of which side you're on, if you see the medical side, are educated about the medical side, and you see their background and their values, and that counts too, because last time I checked, nobody knows whether God is real or not. And you're going to have a lot of people fighting over that.
Right.
So until you drill down to that individual, their value, their belief system, their culture, that's really what's going to drive what is quote unquote right, in my opinion, which is worth jack shit. But thank you so much for coming on and putting up with me. I learned a crap load. That's an official term.
Yeah.
Adrian, that's just cut off the last few seconds.
I'm sure we'll continue this conversation at 2 a.m. sometime.
Absolutely. As I always say, the best conversations are off the mic. That's when we really say what we mean. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Had a good time. I am Woodstock.